Welcome, everybody. This is Shifting Narratives and Practices to Achieve Gender-Just Climate Transitions, an official side event at the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. The event is co-organized by the International Development Research Center, IDRC, Climate and Development Knowledge Network, CDKN, and the UN Research Institute for Social Development, UNRISD. I'm Dunja Krause, Research Officer at UNRISD and co-host of the Just Transition Research Collaborative, and I'll be the moderator for today. Just transition is an increasingly popular concept that seeks to marry rapid decarbonization with equity and social justice. As you may know, more and more just transition initiatives and projects keep popping up around the world, but much of the debate and policy attention still focuses predominantly on male-dominated sectors and formal work such as coal mining. Who is represented in narratives for just low-carbon transition makes a difference. Women's voices and lived experiences need to influence debates and decision-making to achieve gender-egalitarian practices and truly just transitions. So for our discussions today, we bring together a distinguished panel of experts and take a look at ecofeminism to hear how narratives and practices must change in order to secure gender-just transitions. With this event, we hope that we can provoke interesting thinking that can help advance gender justice in low-carbon transitions. But before we start, allow me to make some brief announcements. This session will be recorded and live-streamed via the UNRISD YouTube channel, where it will remain available afterwards. Now, for the organization of our session, I will first ask our panelists to share their insights and reflections in 2 rounds of questions and aim to have some time left for questions and answers from the audience. You will see that we have enabled both a general chat box and a Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. Please use the Q&A box for the questions you would like to pose directly to one or several of our speakers, and put any general comments or information you would like to share into the chat box. You're also very welcome to use the chat box to briefly introduce yourself. For the questions put into the Q&A box, you will also have a chance to vote for different questions put forward, which will help us identify those questions that most people in the audience would like to see answered. Finally, we will be very grateful if you could take a minute at the end of the session to fill in a very short feedback survey, which will help us evaluate the quality of our events. We will share the link in the chat box in due course. But now, let me introduce our panelists. I'm joined here today by 5 fantastic speakers. First of all, Erin Tansey is the director of IDRC's Sustainable Inclusive Economies program and brings over 20 years of experience in international development in humanitarian sectors within Canadian and international non-governmental organizations, UN agencies, and bilateral development programs. A political scientist by training, Erin worked in many different countries around the world and on a wide range of topics, including food security, HIV and mobility, and governance. Next to Erin is Shehnaz Moussa. She's the director of the not-for-profit South-South North, based in Cape Town, South Africa, the director of the Southern Africa Climate Finance Partnership, and the director of the Climate and Development Knowledge Network. She brings a wealth of experience in climate policy and capacity development, and as the first woman of color to obtain a PhD in chemical engineering in South Africa, also has first-hand knowledge of the challenges that marginalized groups face and is committed to make a positive impact on the African continent. Next, we have Abdelrahman Al Tamimi, who is the General Director of the Palestinian Hydrology Group and a part-time lecturer at the Institute of Sustainable Development at Al-Quds University. He has decades of research and consulting experience on water resources and integrated rural development, and was recently appointed as a member of the National Reform Committee and the National Committee for Social Gender and Poverty Alleviation. Then we have Stefania Barca, a distinguished researcher at the Department of History of the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. She previously held the position of Zenstrom Professor in Climate Change Leadership at Uppsala University, where she initiated an activist research network on care work in the just transition. She is the author of Forces of Reproduction, published by Cambridge University Press in 2020, and also of a forthcoming book with Pluto Press, Workers of the Earth, Labor, Ecology, Interproduction in the Age of Climate Change. Now, last but not least, Zu Randiamaro is a feminist and human rights activist and researcher from Madagascar. She is a sociologist by training and the founder and coordinator of the Centre de Recherche et d'Appui pour les Alternatives de Développement Océan Indien. For more than 2 decades, she has been striving to achieve the goal of her lifetime as a professional and activist to contribute to a just transition towards ecofeminist development alternatives in Africa. Now, really a very, very warm welcome to all of you. It's a true pleasure to have you here and hear your insights on what needs to happen to achieve gender just transitions. Let us start off with Stefania. I would like to start with you because you have researched and written extensively about the interlinkages of climate, ecology, and the world of work from a feminist perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about what sparked your interest in just transition?
Yes, and first of all, thank you very much for organizing this conversation and for having me as part of it. So yeah, my interest is in the just transition comes from my research interest into the labor and environment nexus, and in doing this research, I realized that gender also must be part of this conversation, of this research. So let me go a little bit back onto the just transition. What is just transition? Because maybe some of our speakers, our public, are not familiar with this. It's a policy framework that is promoted by both labor organizations and environmental justice organizations to design climate policies from the perspective of those that are most affected by environmental change, but also by economic inequalities. So taking into account both issues, the environmental and the economic and social. And so, as Dunya was mentioning before, this framework indicates how to compensate for the necessary phasing out of the carbon-intensive industries by also, at the same time, responding to the most urgent and vital needs of the frontline communities and creating decent jobs in the process. No? So how is gender relevant to the just transition? This is a question that I want to ask. In my understanding, so far, the answer is through acknowledging the relevance of reproductive and care work for a post-carbon transition. So we need to ask a fundamental feminist political economy question. And the question is, how can we value things differently in a post-carbon society? And more specifically, how can we value work differently? For me, the gender just transition is much broader and deeper than simply including women in the new, newly created or to be created green jobs, no? Or in the green economy or in the circular economy. A gender just transition implies rethinking economies so that it values the kind of work that is truly essential to both human and non-human well-being, and that is reproductive and care work. And only by answering this feminist question, I think we can imagine a true effective transition, not only for women, but for everybody. So now if you can please, Sergio, share my slide. I wanted to show you, this is one concrete proposal that brings the perspective that I was mentioning forward through this proposal of the care income. Currently, this is promoted by the Global Women's Strike. The care income asks governments to remunerate unpaid care work in the forms which are most appropriate to each society based on the needs and demands of the caregivers themselves. This campaign builds upon the legacy of the Wages for Housework movement and its 50 years of struggle to count and remunerate unpaid domestic labor, but it goes further. It carries this perspective forward in a new way, in new ways, with a new perspective. And this new perspective is the perspective of climate justice and of a radical feminist Green New Deal. I think I will stop now because I think my time is over, but I will tell you more on that later on.
Thank you so much, Stefania. I think that's a really good introduction for especially the people who are not yet so familiar with this discourse about just transition and gender, just transition in particular. I want to move over to Erin now, because we have seen that just transition is very often discussed in the global north, in Europe, in North America, Australia as well. But at IDRC, you've recently launched a new research program to support a gender equal recovery from COVID through low carbon innovation, especially in low and lower middle income countries. Can you tell us a bit about what inspired the program and what research priorities you saw emerging, especially from lower income countries?
Hi, well, and thank you so much. It's lovely to be amongst all of you and talking about this issue. I thought maybe I would just give a quick overview of who we are as IDRC, because I'm not sure if your audience knows who we are. So we are a Canadian Crown Corporation. We're part of the government of Canada, but we're an independent research organization that ultimately funds research in the Global South. And it's research that is done by people from the Global South. We've been around for just over 50 years, and we really try to make sure that the voices of Southern experts and practitioners and those with the lived experience can be shared in a wider scale with a global audience. And so we support the work of researchers, which is, in a sense, an investment in intellectual capital that is critical to development. So we've supported global research and innovation for many years, funding on gender equality, on agriculture, many things, climate change, adaptation and resilience, and so forth. So in my team, we are the Sustainable Inclusive Economies division, and we're really looking at trying to focus on this idea of the transition to a low carbon economy. How do we not only not leave women behind, but how do we make sure that they're at the decision-making table, that they have agency over their futures and their lives? So around this time last year, we launched a call for proposals, really focusing on the intersect between these issues, but then also in the context of the COVID pandemic and the recovery. And so we have focused now on, we had over 400 submissions for these proposals, all from Southern partners. That was the eligibility criteria. And so that just shows you the interest that's out there. And we were really looking for sort of innovations that could be scaled up or brought to scale where women have the skills needed, the skills available, or that they can scale up the work that they're already doing in this area. So we have 12 projects at the moment globally. We have projects in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, and in the Middle East. We have a project in Palestine, and it's in a variety of sectors. The tourism sector, agriculture, fisheries, farming, and so on. So I can link you to a longer description of some of these projects that are just starting out, right? So I wanted to make you aware of these projects that are happening, and to ask you to check back in with us through our social media pages and so on, to see what are the results coming out of this research, which will last about 30 months. So I'll leave it there for now, Dunya, and come back with more details later.
Sure. Thank you very much, Erin. I was really fascinated to see the wide range of countries that you have in your program. And we are lucky now to be able to zoom in a little bit, because we have Dr. Tamimi with us, who is one of the people who works on the project in Palestine. Dr. Tamimi, you and your colleagues are leading actually one of the projects under this IDRC programs. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges of gender just transition under uncertain socioeconomic conditions? Dr. Tamimi, I'm not having sound for you. Could you please double check that you're unmuted?
Okay. Thanks, Danja, and thanks for all our colleagues and participants to share with us the ideas and to listen to the Palestinians who are really in difficult situation now. However, our organization, the Palestinian Hydrology Group, which is host the Palestinian Women Water Network, is working in water and environment since 33 years in West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. Our organization actually in very quick way, we do work in wastewater, solid waste, irrigation water, climate change, and rural areas, water, and gender, of course. The network we established for gender and water last three years. It's called Palestinian Women Water Practitioner Network. And the main activity, the main objective is uniting women water professionals nationally and regionally. The network has been established to promote the involvement of women in the implementation of actions and projects and highlight their contribution to the development of the sector. The network is open for organization to be a member, or individuals, or professionals or practitioners in water. Our idea is to create a platform to give the female professionals and water practitioners and normal female to be a member and to discuss the water issue. Unfortunately, in Palestine, water is not a combination of oxygen and hydrogen. It's political, social, environmental, and really not only that, but also the uncertainties of these conditions, socio-economic and political, putting a lot of burden and create tensions among the families and among the female members actually in the society. This kind of tensions, I'll give you just signals of these tensions. For example, 33% of the Palestinian household are receiving water less than 2 hours a week. And in Gaza, the last report published by UN in 2018, Gaza is not the place to live from water point of view, because 95% of the water in Gaza is not suitable for human consumption. That's why the water is the main environmental issue, making burden on the Palestinian people and the Palestinian economy. In addition to that, also we have, because the fragmented society and the absent of legal system, we have overuse pesticides and chemicals in agriculture, which cause a lot of health problems to the woman, and also to especially to the female children. This is solid waste also. It's a huge problem because the Israelis, they don't allow to the Palestinians to create a qualified dumping places. And that's why the solid waste, you see our dumping places are unqualified and most of the solid waste in the streets. To create the platform for discussion all these things, policies, to influence the policies, to promote the Palestinian problems, to find where is possible some solutions. That we created the Gender Water Environment platform, and this platform is, as I said, is only to make the woman voice heard by different actors, locally, regionally, and internationally. And at the same time, we try to promote the women professionals also to be at the top of the policy making levels, and at the same time to be influential, to raise the woman and the female problems in water and environmental sector. Because based on our social structure, actually obtaining the drinking water, cleaning the environment, dealing with the agricultural activities is the woman's job in Palestinian society. That's why the largest burden on environment from environmental pressures is on the woman's shoulders. That's why awareness is not enough, is needed but not enough, but also the participation, real participation, it's not, because you can find women in different official bodies, but sometimes for decoration, not for active role or for policy making, or even to promote their problems. That's why we created this platform hosted by Palestinian Hydrology Group to deal with all these problems. Recently, because our pressure and because other organizations' pressures, we succeed to make the head of Environmental Equality Authority is a female engineer, and it is a big successful because she has very good background in environment and water, and also very active lady. And we think because the active role and lobbying and advocacy of the network, we succeed to do that, and we do also for other ministries. We like to see the gender issue is in the top priority of the Palestinian list. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tamimi. I think that's very inspiring, to highlighting both the challenges that you face in Palestine, but also some quite hopeful messages and some good changes and progress that's being made. There is already one question in the chat box for you. You can already take a look. We'll try and come back to it later. We're moving now further south. Zhu, you work in Madagascar. Can you relate to some of these points? I know that maybe drought is not the current biggest issue for in your context, but what brought you to the search for feminist development alternatives and this focus on just transition?
Thanks, and thanks to all the organizers for the opportunity to participate in this very important event. As you mentioned in my short bio, development alternatives have been at the heart of my professional and activist life for the last 2 decades. So it was quite natural for me to engage with this debate about a gender just transition. And I want to agree with Stefania that the question of the gender just transition is a very complex one, and which is not only about talking about the actual process of transition, but also about how to create participatory models of development, which should actually be the final goal of a transition. So this means for me giving women at the grassroots who are at the front line of a climate catastrophe the right not only to reject imposed forms of transition, such as was promoted in the global north by some people, talking about the Green New Deal or green, very green kind of transition. So for me, talking about a gender just transition is also about giving women the right to democratically define how to design processes of transition that are responsive to their needs and concerns in these times of ecological crisis. And because Madagascar is one of the countries which are really at the forefront of the impacts of this of climate change at the moment, in partnership with Women in Mining African Alliance, my organization has supported such a process whereby women in communities most affected by the climate crisis in Madagascar have engaged in dialogues on ecofeminist development alternatives at the local level. So this process of women's dialogues from below at the community level shows that conceiving of a gender just transition is not so much about trying to design a perfect system of what we could call egalitarian development, but it is rather about which processes and principles we use to decide what are the priorities and who benefits from the transition. So for me, the just transition is a feminist, and it is a highly political issue. So for this reason, I believe that the processes that we use must be meaningfully democratic and participatory. And the principles must be about staying within the boundaries of sustainability that are given to us by our planet Earth. The principle is also about sufficiency as opposed to over-exploitation of nature for profit. And it is also about solidarity between human beings from the global south as well as from the global north. So let me end by giving you a quote from one of the participants in these women's dialogues that we have organized in Madagascar, and who says that it is our duty to protect all the living organisms in our ecosystems. As human beings, we have no right to kill or destroy other living creatures and their natural habitats, especially the forests, which are their homes. Furthermore, we must be respectful and extremely careful about the ways in which we are using our natural wealth, because our survival depends on it. So this means that we must preserve our natural resources, but also be in solidarity and love each other. So let me end here with this quote from Celestine, who was a participant in the Women's Dialogues.
Thank you so much, Sue. I think that's very inspiring and also hard to follow. So I apologize in advance to Shanaz, who now needs to make that bridge from very inspiring, we have to protect all living organisms in order to ensure our own survival. But we're moving to Shanaz, who is based in South Africa and who has, again, a super interesting experience and possibly slightly different perspective as someone who worked a lot on capacity development. You just heard about some of the challenges that we face with regard to integrating these gender and feminist considerations into just transition plans and the challenges of making sure that policy is democratically and participatorily, if that's a word, designed to ensure gender justice. Can you help us bringing the two together? How do we actually practically move forward with this kind of mainstreaming and changing some of our approaches to ensure we listen to women's voices and give or take agency as women?
Thank you, Dunya. And yes, actually all the speakers were absolutely inspirational. So I do feel a bit anxious, but it's all good. So I think what I'd like to do is actually talk you through, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joining, because I mean, there's so much going on, and to take the time out to come to this event. So thank you for that. So what I'd like to do is talk you through a report that we recently published as the Climate and Development Knowledge Networks, the CDKN. It's called Advancing Gender Equality and Climate Action, a practical guide to setting targets and monitoring progress. I'll share the link in the chat box, but what this report does, it shows exactly what can go right when green jobs programs are designed with and for women. And I think it touches on what everybody has talked about before me. So in this report, we document with our partners SNV how intentionally involving women as the producers of improved cook stoves in Tanzania has led to much better uptake of the cook stoves and sustained household economic benefits for sellers on the one side, as well as for the buyers on the other side. So the improved cook stoves are a form of clay and metal cook stove that was designed to reduce emissions, which is actually very important for reducing indoor air pollution and for improving families' health, as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So traditionally, women have been seen as the important market or consumer base for the improved cook stoves. However, this study showed how important it was to give women the chance to step up on the production, marketing, and business development side of things too. So it's secure green jobs, not just consumers. Then in the same report, we also document with our partners, and here it was Mercy Corps, the benefits of providing comprehensive career coaching, targeted literacy. And this included financial literacy and business skills development, peer learning opportunities, and confidence building to adolescent girls as they seek decent work. And in this case, it was in diverse parts of Nigeria. What we find is that there's very strong lessons in this holistic approach that could be pulled across and applied to climate policies and programs to get women onto the green career ladder, if there is such a word, yeah. What's especially important about this case study is the intersectional approach. And it was taken to identifying adolescent girls with particular abilities or disabilities and tailoring the program to their needs so that they are not left behind. In all of the documenting and public discussions we have had around these studies, a key point has been made. There's a need to provide women and girls with dedicated spaces to identify their own aspirations, receive information about labor market opportunities, and choose their job paths. That's around supporting individual choice in the context of supportive group environments. And also critically, there's a need to involve broader community institutions such as teachers, schools, elders, traditional authorities in understanding and acknowledging that women and girls have the right to benefit from just transitions, so that these actors proactively support their wives, sisters, daughters, and see that women's enhanced and equitable roles in the green economy will not only be to the benefit and well-being of the women themselves, but to the benefit of all of society. And with that, Dunya, I hand back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much. I really am learning already quite a lot from this panel. It's really great to hear from all of you. Before we move to our second round, just a reminder that our participants can already put questions to our panelists into the Q&A box. So I just encourage you to do that while you listen, so that it's easier to kind of come back to for us at the end. So we heard quite a lot of things already, which I think point to the complexity of the challenge at hand, the interlinkages that just transition, climate, and gender have with other political issues on the plate, but also the diversity of possible solutions. And in this next round, we're trying to look at more specifically at what needs to happen to facilitate a gender-just transition. I would like to start with Dr. Tamimi now. Based on your opinion and experience, what practices need to change to achieve gender-just transition for you in your context, and where would you start? Is it something that you need to achieve in Palestine? Is it something where you really rely on international support and debates? How are you going about it?
Yes, I think that from our perspective, the entry point or the starting point is to empower the woman by knowledge. Knowledge is the key issue to protect the woman rights, and also to open the doors to the woman to enter all or to be part of all levels of decision making, policy formulation, practical things. That's why we focus on providing the female's knowledge to be a tool to give her the empowerment. This is one point. The second point also, while we are providing the females knowledge about water problems, to be able to, and environmental problems, of course, to be able to be proactive participants in all activities. Also, at the same time, we try to convince the rural, especially rural women, their rights, water rights, and their rights to access water, information about water, to participate in policies, is not a charity from the society. It is full right. That's important to provide the females with knowledge, also to be right owner, and at the same time to be proactive in the all levels of water and environmental issues.
Thank you so much. I want to come back to Zoo. May I call you an ecofeminist? I think you're an ecofeminist, right? Would you self-describe as such? I want to pick your brain a little bit more about some of the things you just said, and have you tell us how ecofeminism informs your work and why, for you, it's a powerful alternative to the mainstream approaches. So just kind of going a little bit deeper into how can we utilize ecofeminism as something to really achieve change at different levels?
Thanks, Dunya. Yes, you can treat me of an ecofeminist, which I am, and which I'm proud of being, actually. I think that ecofeminism offers us a way, first of all, as a theory, a way of making sense of the world around us, but it also offers values and a practice of living which challenges oppression and inequality, and which also gives a voice to those who are the primary victims of the climate and the ecological crisis. So at the very heart of ecofeminism lies a challenge to all forms of unequal power. It is about changing from a way of living and seeing that is based on domination and exploitation to one which is based on feminist values of care and responsibility. So as an African, I believe that African ecofeminism emphasizes the connections and the dependency between all forms of life, as Celestine, whom I quote earlier, reminded us. Ecofeminism affirms that no life form can exist separate and on its own. And ecofeminism is also guided by care and an ethic of reciprocity in the use of land, water, and forest, basically in the use of natural resources. So therefore, the African ecofeminist ethic therefore values inclusion, togetherness, and conserving life and nature. And from my own experience, I can say that African ecofeminism draws its ideas and visions of development from the struggles of women who bear the brunt of the prevailing extractivist and patriarchal development system, and who also form the core of struggles to defend the land, the lives, the livelihoods, and the way of living and future of their communities and families. So how can we try to put ecofeminism on the table of international policy debates? I think that it has to start with a recognition that women must be at the center of the just transition and any other movement to address the ecological and climate crisis. Otherwise, this transition would only serve to perpetuate a destructive development system, the one that we have now, and which has proved to have made of women the main victims of its destructive impacts. So I think that for all these reasons, international policy debates should focus on the existing ecofeminist development alternatives that are already lived and experienced by women in in a growing number of communities across Africa and the global South. And not only lived and experienced by women, but also by indigenous people and other marginalized social groups. And these living alternatives must really become the focus of international policy debates, because I believe that they are a real alternative narrative to mainstream development that is the cause of the climate catastrophe and the very bleak future that is lying ahead of us. I hope I have responded a little bit to your question.
You have. It's an interesting change of tone in a way, from very inspirational uplifting in the first message from the community level to the outlook internationally that is unfortunately quite bleak, as you said. But there's still a lot to be done about that. And Stefania, you have worked both with ecofeminist movements on the ground and written about feminist political ecology from a more theoretical viewpoint. Can you share some of your insights on why we need to connect the two to achieve gender just transitions, what entry points you see, also maybe on some of the other panelists' points that you've heard so far?
Sure, Dunya. Well, first of all, let me say that I think Sue already gave us a wonderful definition of theoretical definition of what ecofeminism is all about. So I will just add a little bit of more historical perspective, because I'm basically a historian, and as a scholar, I've looked a little bit into the history of the movement, which is a longer history. It started officially in the 70s, when the very first time that the word ecofeminism was invented, and then this word had a large resonance with what women were doing all over the world by mobilizing against a number of issues. Back in the 70s, the first ecofeminist mobilizations were against nuclear power plants, bomb testing, in defense of biodiversity in a number of settings, of forests, with the tree hugging practice, and many other, and in defense of soils, of seeds, of non-human animals, and also mobilizing against toxic waste facilities, especially in Black in communities, indigenous communities, and working class and peasant communities. And this was happening all over the world. And these movements, this mobilization started to, because there were a women's leadership in them, they started to recognize what they were doing as ecofeminism. Then the Rio 92 happened, the first Rio conference on the environment, and this was an important moment for ecofeminists from all over the world to meet and recognize themselves as a movement. And then 20 years later, at the Rio Plus 20 conference in 2012, ecofeminists at that point had joined forces with a broader composite movement, which is what we call it the alter globalization movement, and specifically with the climate justice movement, which is really a galaxy made up of many different movements, but they all recognize the need for radical change beyond simply greening capitalism with technological and market mechanisms. No? So this is what they have in common, basically. A different vision of human progress, of what human progress is all about. It's not about technology and the market per se, no? But it's about alternative, different ways of realizing human potential. And so this is what ecofeminists are contributing, as Zoe was telling us before. So at this point, I just wanted to show you two more slides. Sergio, if you can please put them on, to give you a sense of some of the achievements of the ecofeminist perspective so far. I think the most important achievement has been how ecofeminists have been contributing to this debate on climate justice, and not only the debate, but also the search for alternatives, alternative policy and platforms and strategies, one of which is the Feminist Green New Deal platform that this slide shows you, which is a platform co-founded in 2019 by 14 US-based women's rights and social movement, environmental justice movements and organizations. But this platform, originally founded by these 14 groups, has been then endorsed by more than 40 other groups all over the world. So it's become more global in its scope. And in promoting this platform, ecofeminist movements have been pivotal, and especially, I can mention here too, the We Do and the We Can movements, which are both ecofeminist organizations. And then other organizations also are promoting now the Feminist Green New Deal, for example, WEN and the Women's Environmental Network in the UK, and the Women's Budget Group in the UK, and also the Women's Group of Finance for Development at the UN level. And among these, I would also put the Global Women's Strike with its campaign for the care income, which I showed you before, because the campaign for the care income is part of Global Women's Strike's participation contribution to the Green New Deal for Europe, which is also a Green New Deal campaign. So basically, ecofeminist ideas and perspectives are fundamentally contributing to this effort, to this collective effort at imagining a post-carbon society and a transition to this post-carbon society based on feminist principles.
Thank you very much, Stefania. I think that gives us a really good overview of this movement, and I think it's something that we, with the JTRC, we also like to really look into the history of a movement, where it came from, how it has kind of made its way into different policy debates, because it really helps us to understand where some of the tensions come from and where some of the problems that some groups have with the concept are rooted. So I think that's really great to have. Thank you very much. So Erin and Shanaz, I want to turn back to the both of you, as the claim we're making in our event today is that both narratives and practices must change to secure gender-just transitions. And yet the connection between the many inspiring and often very local level examples of real life change and the narratives that are dominate international policy debates can seem quite elusive. And I just wanted you to reflect a little bit how in your own work and in your organization's work, you combine some of these thoughts of changing practices and narratives to inform policy change. Erin, would you like to start?
Yeah, yes, sure. You know, just listening to some of that history reminded me of another sort of historical feminist, Hazel Henderson, who I think she was around in the 1970s, and she called for a change in the way that we measure GDP. And she talked about the love economy and the layer cake, which is I've always loved that image where you have Mother Nature at the bottom layer that just holds everything up. And one layer above that is what she calls the love economy, which we now consider or call the care economy. And so without Mother Nature and the care economy, nothing else can really happen in our economies, whether it's public sector or private sector. So I just have that image in my mind as Stefania was speaking. But to bring it back to some of the work that we're doing, I mean, I think that ultimately, yes, things need to change. There is a lot of talk of integrating gender considerations into climate action, into low carbon transitions, and we know that, and it's all over there. But quick fixes are really not enough. They're really not enough. And by quick fixes, you know, we mean, like as an example, offering women training opportunities on some new solar powered skill or something like that to be able to tap into these, transitioning to low carbon, but not taking into consideration or addressing the underlying challenges and barriers that women and young women face, right? So if we offer training without thinking of the care economy, women are just not going to be able to benefit as much as, let's say, men. In fact, will just increase their time poverty right? So we really need to start integrating the care economy into this low carbon discussion as being, two sides of a coin, right? So so for instance, in Latin America, 2/3 of the women that are not employed or not in education or in training are not in those things. Why? Because of their care responsibilities. So at IDRC, we are continuing to work on this and zero in really on the care economy more specifically, and we're working with the private sector actors, impact investors, to find to locate some solutions that are out there and see how those localized solutions could possibly be scaled up so that women have access to affordable care, either for their young children or for the elderly people that they are responsible for, and also within that care economy, looking at the job and the quality of jobs for women who find themselves earning their livelihood in that space. I won't elaborate too much. I'll pass it over to Shanaz. But that's really, my real message is, if we don't address the care economy and the time poverty of women, then we will never get to a just transition. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll just give it straight over to Shanaz.
Thank you, Dunya. So I think what I'm thinking through and want to talk to actually links very much to what Erin was saying. So I think as CDKN, when we saw the call for just transition emerge, I think it was UNFCCC COP24, the Solidarity and Just Transition Silesia Declaration, which was spearheaded by the Polish presidency, we saw that it was aimed at addressing the vulnerability of labor markets in carbon-intensive sectors that are facing the pressure of change towards low-carbon development. In response to this declaration, large multinational businesses have responded with a pledge that the world's transition to a net zero economy shall be job-creating, not job-reducing. So we can see that the just transition agenda has been framed as a green jobs agenda, as a workers' reskilling agenda. Most of the global debate and response around it has cast just transition policies as an opportunity for constructive collaboration among government, trade unions, businesses, and their leadership to ensure that current workers are not left behind in the transition to a net zero emission world. Now, the flaw in this framing is that many of the world's most climate affected people don't hold even formal sector jobs. They are working in the informal economy, informal sectors, and also in the unpaid care economy. They are invisible in the framing characterized in the just transition debates. So largely invisible and poorly acknowledged in this just transition framing are the realities of low-income countries and the most socio-economically vulnerable in all societies. And even within those unacknowledged countries and communities, women are disproportionately represented as both informal sector workers and laborers in the unpaid care economy. In CDKN, the problem we have with this framing is that it's almost exclusively about ensuring that perceived losers in the net zero transition receive compensation for their job loss, whereas it does not address the women and other socially disadvantaged groups who are already much worse off, who do not have access to secure, sustainable, decent work and adequate support for or shared responsibility of care work. The just economic transition debate must be anchored in and take as its departure point the existing inequalities and weaknesses in our labor markets, not purely the high emission, low emission shift. So we do not want to see green economies developing where the best green jobs are solely being earmarked for the dropouts from the high carbon jobs. These opportunities for decent green jobs absolutely need to be open to everyone. Everyone needs to be able to meaningfully advance in secure, low carbon, climate resilient work, because women and other socially disadvantaged groups, including people living with disabilities, Indigenous people, and ethnic minorities, and others have not had equal opportunity in the past. This means in practice that investments in green job schemes need to make intentional, well-resourced efforts to include these groups fully in their design and implementation. And that is what an ecofeminist approach to the just economic transition means for us as CDKN. So Dunya, with that, I'm handing back to you.
Thank you so much for making some of these points. I think they resonate very well with some of the discussions we have had on just transition with different groups, because I think it also comes back to really what you understand a just transition is. And we are actively fighting to try and make sure that people see it really as this much needed transition to justice for everyone. Of course, it's in the context of low carbon transitions, but it should not mean that we're just protecting the rights and the benefits and compensation for a select few. So I think there's a lot of tension there, some risks as well to alienate worker movements who have very good intentions and are trying to really achieve something better and protect the rights of the working people. But I think I fully second and support the statement that we need to make sure that those ideas around just transition are inclusive and that they look at more than just the most directly affected workers in a shift to the low carbon economy. We do now have around 10 minutes to pick up some of the questions that we've received. I know they are quite complex questions. I would still ask you to try and limit your answers to like a minute or two max so that we can try and pick up a few of them. The first one, Dr. Tamimi, is it's probably very tricky to answer in a very short amount of time. It's asking, why does the Israeli government not want Palestine to establish solid waste pumping sites? And what is the inequity between Palestine, where 95% of water is not safe for drinking, compared to Israel in general? Could you maybe just say something very short, and if needed, put more, type an answer or a link to more information?
Yes. Based on the Oslo Interim Agreement, where the Palestinian Authority established, the Palestinian territory is classified to different categories, A, B, C. And A is under Palestinian Authority control, B is joint control, Palestine, Israel, and C, which is 68% of the Palestinian territory, is totally under Israeli control. Most of the qualified places for dumping places is in Area C. That's why the Israelis refuse to give permit to Palestinians to establish qualified dumping places, because under Israeli control. And of course, you cannot do the dumping place in Area A because it is a populated area. For the water distribution, the Israelis' policy is very clear and and published. It's not secret that the Palestinians they have to purchase desalinated water from Israeli water companies, which is nowadays in Israel there is 12 desalination plants, 4 already constructed, 4 under construction, and 4 planned. And Israelis, they want to make the Palestinians forced to purchase desalinated water, and groundwater in Palestine will be used to develop the more Israeli settlements and colonies.
Thank you very much for a complex and yet super concise answer. It's very well appreciated. Next, it's questions for all panelists. I'll pose them all together, and then maybe you can pick which parts you seek to answer. I'll give you again like 1 or 2 minutes each. So first of all, it's again Jan Johnson asking, which argument do you find more effective when arguing for integrated ecofeminism? First, the ethical perspective of equality and human rights, or the economic efficacy argument that women's contributions and innovation and industry, add innovation and industry improvement. So which one is better, ethical perspective or the economic argument? And then from Elizabeth Carono, I would be interested to know from the panelists what they consider to be shifting narratives despite the overwhelming dominant economic theories and practices. Zu, would you like to start?
Open your mic, Zu.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think everyone would know that I would respond that the ethical perspective is the most important. I mean, this notion of the instrumentalization of the economic argument, which boils down to the instrumentalization of women labor and agency for economic purposes. I think it's part of a narrative that we have to change. I think it is high time that we recognize that the ethical dimension of change must become more visible and must be given more visibility and more importance than it has been before, because that's part of the reason why we have a climate crisis. It's because of the kind of economic model that we have been living for centuries now, and which has led us to where we are. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Sue. Erin, would you agree that the ethical is more important than the economic, or are there maybe examples for where the economic argument is needed for change?
Thanks. I would personally agree that the ethical is more important. I would definitely agree with that. But from my own experience, I have seen that it's really, unfortunately, money that talks. And we can't wait for ethical, for the ethical priorities of people and corporations to change. You know, I think we have to do both, but certainly pointing out the economic imperative of ensuring that you know, for instance, you know, just this fact that the world is losing close to 8% of global GDP due to a lack of investment in the care sector. Now, in my opinion, that matters. And what we need to do is take that kind of information to the ministers of finance, to the ministers of the environment. And they need to be able to come together and speak about how each one of their decisions about various things impacts on the other. Yeah, that's what I would say. And then also that there is a movement of these triple impact businesses, you know, the B Corporation movement, especially in Latin America, but other parts of the world, where people, profit, and planet is really part of their DNA. And this sector is growing. Absolutely. Can we do more to promote these kinds of businesses? Absolutely. one of the things that IDRC has done is invested in helping to create case studies for business schools and law schools. So if you go to business school, you do that sort of case study model, but using B Corporation case studies so that students who are just going to start out in the world can see that you can actually have a profitable business that is good for people and good for the planet. And I think we just need to do more of that because, I don't think that human beings are inherently bad. They're not, right? I think sometimes they're misguided, don't know what the right thing is to do, and easier to do things as they have always been. But if we continue to provide good, solid examples of how these three things can be combined successfully, I think we'll go a long way.
Thank you very much, Erin. I think you're pointing to a lot of things that would be fantastic grounds for like a lot more in-depth discussions, which unfortunately we don't have time for right now. I am switching gears a little bit because we had more questions coming in. So I just want to briefly ask Stefania, there was a question for you on the campaign for care income that seeks to assign distinct economic value to care work, but then some people don't like the idea of commodifying care, especially its personal and effective components, and to value nature in instrumental and non-intrinsic terms. How can this difference in perspective be worked through? Just yes. 1 minute, maybe.
Thanks for the question. This is, of course, a very, very key question to this whole debate. Now, let me just say very briefly, care is already commodified, okay? So we already live in a world where a lot of care work is being commodified. And at the same time, we also live in a world where a lot of people of care work is unpaid, and a lot of people are forced to do it because they have no other way to have access to care services. So the proposal of the care income is a response to that. And not by chance, what is demanded is an income, it's not a wage, it's not a salary, it's not a commodification of care work. It's publicly funded system of supporting caregivers by recognizing them the value in non-market terms. But still, that's why I was insisting so much about the importance of rethinking value, no? Because the care income is a form of allocating value in non-market terms, but valuing the work of caregiving by supporting the caregivers themselves. That's my answer, that short answer.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Shinaz, you know what's coming. I'll come to you last again with the most difficult task of addressing the question about what you would consider shifting narratives despite the overwhelming dominant economic theories in practice, and maybe even what tools you have found more effective to shift narratives and pursue gender transformative objectives in green transitions. If you can give us your idea in like 1 minute or so, and then I'll finish us up.
Totally. So I think the way to shift narratives is, and what we found is particularly through storytelling, and to just get out there and to talk about the new narratives. Because I think the business as usual narratives are not going to get us very far, and they're not going to shift the debate and the conversation. And I think we need to be getting on women, particularly from on the ground communities, into the global community to tell their stories where it can be heard and where it matters. So that's me.
Thank you so much. That was extremely concise and a very great answer. Thank you, all of the panelists, for your fantastic inputs. I may be biased, but I found this conversation truly insightful. I think we've seen really inspiring innovations and progress being made in different parts of the world. Gender justice and climate justice feel almost within reach just when you hear these concrete examples. And I think we've seen we need to connect them to some of the narrative changes, policy debates, in order for them to really reach the full potential and contribute to a transformation at a much larger scale. I thank you all for listening and participating. I thank especially IDRC and CDKN for co-organizing It's been a real pleasure. Please do also sign up for our next side event on Thursday, where we will looking to promote evidence-based policies in the Global Alliance of Care, also co-organized with IDRC. And yeah, I wish you all a very good rest of your day and week, and hope to see you around soon. Thank you.